You know, they say if you're not there, you can't help. And Phil and Bruce being over there, right on the square there in Kiev and also in Odessa, of course, that was a big help. We in Veterans for Peace were in Palestine in February and March, and we stayed with the Tamimi family for 2 nights. I hope that you know of Ahed Tamimi, who is 16 years old. I had some photos with me in my all-purpose backpack, and I gave them to Tarak, who was with us on that, of course, led one of our delegation, and Will was also a member, so he can pass them around to show you what the Tamimi family, at least the first 3, mother, father, and I look like. This is important, and I want to kind of speak to this because we have no choice, just like the Tamimi family has no choice. I talked to the father and I said, you know, how do you let your children go out there? Your house is scheduled for demolition, and here they are protesting in front of the wall. Your son has been shot in the leg. Your brother-in-law has been killed with a shot from a sniper in his head. Why do you take these risks? And he said, we have no alternative. The alternative is to acquiesce. We will never acquiesce. And that's up to us as well. We can't acquiesce. I'm going to start with a little poem from Rudyard Kipling, and you'll see its significance, I hope, as I go on. It is not wise for the Christian white to hustle the Asian brown, for the Christian riles and the Asian smiles, and he weareth the Christian down. At the end of the fight is a tombstone white with the name of the late deceased, and the epitaph drear, a fool lies here who tried to hustle the East. That has to do with white supremacy, of which racism is a major, but not the only part. And I'd like to focus on that in my remarks here, since everything else about NATO has been so well covered. What's distinctive about NATO in this context? Anybody think about it? Yeah, all Europeans, and what else? All, yeah, right, all white. Right? All white, okay? Now, this is a long tradition. U.S.-led foreign policy. George Kennan, who used to be my favorite statesman, I find out he's elitist. I found out he's racist. And the first policy paper coming out of the State Department after the war said, we have control of the 50% of the world's resources, but only represent one ninth of the world's population. And so we have to take advantage of everybody else. No more talk about human rights. It's going to come to the exercise of hard power. That's what he said, okay? Now, Trump, what did he say? Well, when he was in China, he said, you know, I don't have anything against the Chinese. They take advantage of other countries. I admire that. You got to take advantage of other countries. He said that, okay? So this has to do with taking advantage. It has to do with taking advantage of people in S-hole countries, right? And this is the archetypical white supremacist, Trump. White supremacist, white racist. It's us and they. Whether we call them slopes or gooks, sand camels or sand jockeys or whatever, towel heads, we make them the other. And all you need to do is watch Collateral Murder, which future Senator from Maryland, Chelsea Manning, released, and which WikiLeaks published, to realize what it does to our own troops. I mean, talk about brutalizing others, what our own troops are brutalized by this terrible, terrible white dominance or white supremacy. Now, last question. What's distinctive about our use of atomic weapons? Who do we use them on? Yeah, non-whites, people who Truman hated. Truman was a racist from the word go. He never referred to African Americans by any other label but the N-word. He had his Secretary of State, Jimmy Burns, from South Carolina, okay? And Jimmy Burns and Truman were the only people in our government that thought it was okay to use the atomic bomb on people. Why? Because those people didn't look like us. That's why. Those people could be marginalized. Those people could be easily made the other. The Germans, they kind of look like us, don't they? Most of them, right? And you put them in internment camps. You marginalize them. That's racism, folks. That's white supremacy. And from the great state of North Carolina comes also General William Westmoreland, who said after the war, you know, the Asians, they don't really have the same, they don't place the same value on life. Life is cheap. Life is cheap in the Orient. It's on film, folks. Now, of course, we have Lindsey Graham. Now, Lindsey Graham, he's saying now, I don't know, Armed Services Committee, they never told me there was troops in, I have to be careful about how I pronounce this now, Niger, yeah. They don't tell me people in, where's Niger? Oh, that's one of those asshole countries there. Oh, okay, okay. That's what we have, folks. We have to face into it, all right? And we've been reminded here. We ought to take counsel and example from our African-American brothers and sisters. I want to share with you a letter that James Baldwin wrote back in November of 1970. It was given me as a birthday present yesterday for Nick Muttern's birthday. See, he doesn't take presents, but he gives them on his birthday. An open letter to my sister, Miss Angela Davis. She was in prison. November 19, 1970. Dear sister, one might have hoped that by this hour, the very sight of chains on black flesh would be so intolerable a sight for the American people, so unbearable a memory, that they would spontaneously rise up and strike off the manacles. But now, more than ever, Americans appear to measure their safety in the chains and the corpses of others. And so, Newsweek can put you on its cover, chained. You look exceedingly alone, say, as the Jewish housewife in the boxcar headed for Dachau, or as one of our ancestors chained together with others during the ocean passage. Well, since we live in an age in which silence is not only criminal, but suicidal, I have been making as much noise as I can here in Europe, on radio and TV. In fact, I have just returned from a land called Germany, which was made notorious by a silent majority not so very long ago. Yeah. Listen to this part. Let me put it this way. As long as white Americans take refuge in their whiteness, they will allow millions of other people to be slaughtered. I'll say it again. As long as Americans take refuge in their whiteness, they will allow millions of other people to be slaughtered. So long as their whiteness puts so sinister a distance between their own experience and the experience of others, they will never feel themselves sufficiently worthwhile to become responsible for themselves. As we once put it in our black church, they will perish in their sins, that is, in their delusions. Now, we do feel sufficiently worthwhile to change our fate and the fate of our children, says James Baldwin. We know that a person is not a thing. and is not to be placed at the mercy of other things. We know that air and water, this is 1970, folks. We know that air and water belong to all mankind and not merely to the wealthy. We know that a baby does not come into the world merely to be the instrument of someone else's profit. My dear sister Angela, some of us, white and black, know how great a price has already been paid to bring this new consciousness. If we know that, then we must fight for your life as though it were our own, which it is. We must render impassable with our own bodies the corridor to the gas chamber. For if they take you in the morning, they will take us in the night. Therefore, peace, Brother James. So the question is, do we feel sufficiently worthwhile? All of us. Then we ought to draw from the courage and the example of African American brothers and sisters. And one, we have to cut open the boil of ignorance. Now, Dr. King had, in his famous speech, in his famous letter from the Birmingham City Jail, he had a passage that is very seldom quoted, but one of my favorites. It's about a boil, right? Okay. Like a boil that can never be cured until it is opened with all its pus-flowing ugliness to the natural remedies of air and light, so too injustice must be uncovered with all the friction its uncovering creates. Yes. To the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can be cured. So that's our first task. Is it impossible? Nothing is impossible for us. We got to do it. It can't be impossible by definition. We have to educate our brothers and sisters throughout this great land as to what's really going on. Okay, now secondly, we have to realize that there is such a thing as too late. Martin said that as well, didn't he? Okay, now, it's getting close, folks. It's getting real close. And I know some episodes from history where people waited until too late, okay? Now, some of you know about Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Germany, right? Well, there was another fellow in Germany about the same time. His name was Haushofer, was his name. Albrecht Haushofer. He was a geolog. He was a geologist at the University of Berlin. And some of you know what tenure means. He had tenure, okay? And how did he get tenure? By keeping his mouth shut. That's how he got tenure, right? Okay? And then as he watched his Jewish and other brothers and sisters being wrapped up, he had a conscience. And he started speaking out, and he created quite a following, okay? And he became a danger. So he is wrapped up and put in prison, just like Haushofer, different prison in Berlin. Now, the Nazis, of course, were very methodical. Before they'd kill you, and they'd either hang you or shoot you in those days, you had to confess. You had to have a confession. You had to write out your confession. And so Haushofer said, that's for the birds. I'm not going to do that. And as the Allies approached, they shot him, okay? Now, as he got up off the floor, as they picked him up off the floor, out of his pocket fell a little settle, a little piece of paper. It was his confession. It was written in the form of a sonnet. It's in German, but it's very brief. I'll read it to you. Doch. The name of it was Schuldig. Schuld. Schuld, anyone? Guilt. Doch bin ich schuldig, aber anders als ihr denkt. Yeah, I'm guilty, but it's not what you're thinking. Ich musste früher meine Pflicht erkennen. Ich musste schärfer Unheil nennen. I should have more quickly recognized my duty to call evil, evil. Mein Urteil habe ich zu lang gelenkt. My judgment I put off far too long. Ich habe gewarnt, he did warn, okay? He warned, ich habe gewarnt, aber nicht genug. Und what's genug? No, right. Ich habe gewarnt, aber nicht genug und klar, claro. There's no comparative in German for klar, right? Ich habe gewarnt, aber nicht genug und klar und heute weiß ich, was ich schuldig war. And today, I recognize what I was guilty of. So, folks, a lot of us that have enjoyed white supremacy, white privilege, I know I'm preaching sort of to the choir, but, you know, we still haven't done enough for our own consciousness and to spread the word to our fellow citizens. There is an example here. It's the example of the Black church. It's the example of the civil rights movement. It's the example of the people who have spoken so eloquently here yesterday and the day before. So, last thing I'll say is this, that I noticed that some of you have the same color hair that I do. And there's a lesson there, because when I got beat up pretty bad by simply turning my back and standing up in front of Hillary Clinton 7 years ago now, well, Leah was vice president of Veterans for Peace at the time, right? And as soon as she heard about it, and it was on the news, like very briefly, she told everybody else in Veterans for Peace. And that is why Hillary Clinton got 7,565,251 telephone calls and emails, all right? Now, what's the point there? Well, young people, with all due respect, you know, they got it coming to them. When they demonstrate and they get beat up, well, you know, they're young people. But old people? Americans care about old people, all right? They don't like old people getting beat up. So you old people have a distinct advantage, all right? You ought to put it into play before it's too late. Thank you very much.